Good morning, YouTubers. I am demonstrating I will be in a moment, demonstrating a cold start on my Cub Cadet 3184. This thing has the CH740, so I believe it's 18 horsepower engine in it. It's got 645 hours on it. And it's got good power, but it consumes a decent amount of oil. I bought this tractor about a year ago and had some concerns with oil consumption because I noticed that the plugs were pretty badly fouled. So I have since purchased a replacement engine from Repower Specialists. This is the Kohler. It is a 740-3347, and since I'm potentially going to sell the old engine out of this Cub Cadet, I wanted to demonstrate a true cold start. Finished up using this for the year about a month ago or so, and it hasn't been started since. I just took the cover off, and so I'll be demonstrating that. It's in relatively good condition. I basically kind of cleaned it up, tore it all down, and cleaned it up last year, and you can see it's fairly clean, although you can see the grime there from leaf grinding this fall. That needs to be cleaned up. But anyway, I'll be taking this engine out and hopefully installing that one over there. But I did want to demonstrate a truly cold start. As I said, this has not been started since probably, I would say, late November. So hopefully my battery is still good. Let's see, we'll start by giving it about 2/3. There you can see. Good gravy, it's hard to see. 2/3 throttle and about the same on choke. And we'll hit the brake. We'll be ready to choke it down once it starts. Alright, well, I just got done giving the old girl a bath. I figured I might as well go ahead and clean up that engine as best I could. Cleaned up pretty good, as you can see here. Not too bad. It has a little bit of an oil leak there at the oil drain. Not quite sure what's going on with that, but that all cleaned up nice. So did the rest of the tractor. Just thought it was a wise thing to go ahead and get it cleaned before taking it in to start tearing everything down. So all right, well, here we go. It is the next morning, actually dark 30, and I'm going to begin the process of tearing this thing down so as I can swap in the new engine. We're in my garage. It's kind of tight and cramped in here. I've got an engine lift. I don't really need it. This thing only weighs about 100 pounds, but you know, to save an old man's back, I guess it's kind of worth it. I've got a cart where I'm keeping my tools. I basically just have a good old Milwaukee powered ratchet and a couple of lights. And I got a nice new stainless steel table that I haven't pulled the cover off, just to store, or place to put all the parts as I take things apart. And as for what I'm doing, there is a manual for the 3000 series, a PDF manual available if you search for it online. Cub Cadet 3000 series service manual, and there's basically two sections that I'm following in this, so I won't go into painstaking detail, but basically the first thing that I'm going to do is remove the fender, which should help you get to access a lot of things. I've actually, as a part of this process, I've got to install a new fuel, I guess it's technically not a sending unit. It basically just tells you the idiot light on the dash, tells you when your gas is low. So I'll be installing that, and I also have a new spool valve to install because, well, it leaks, and this will be the third attempt to get that thing not to leak. So that's why I'm doing that part. And then there's also, I guess that's section 3 of the manual. And then in section 12, this is 12.1, we have the dreaded and highly feared engine removal and replacement. It's really, really good. It's got basically all of the steps pretty much in the order that you'd want to follow them, and it also even tells you what size ratchets and wrenches you'll be using along the way. So everything on the Cub Cadet, of course, being made in the US, is going to be standard or SAE, no metric stuff. And of course, with the engine itself, all of that stuff is metric. So if you can just kind of remember that, it should be fairly straightforward. So I'm going to get cracking here. First thing I'm going to be doing is removing the seat, which is fairly easy to do. There is one thing I wanted to point out as far as the seat goes that tripped me up originally. There are bolts that go here, here, and in the back, here, and here. Those are not the bolts that you are removing. So what you want to do is slide the seat either forward or backward. Let me see if I can get that done here with one hand. Okay, they're sliding forward. And the bolts that you actually want are here and here, and those are Torx. I believe they are T30. So basically you leave this attached to these rails and you're just removing these rails. There's one in the back as shown here, and then two in the back rather, and then two in the front. We'll get that off. The next step beyond that is there's a handful of bolts. There's a bolt here on each side, and then there's some pan bolts who pull these rubber foot pads up. There's going to be a bolt here, and I believe a bolt here, if I'm not mistaken. It's all in the manual. Pull that off. Take the gas cap off. There's we're going to need to remove this lever, and we're going to need to remove the 3 pedals here, which is done, per the manual. Remove those, and then this entire fender assembly will just lift off. And so that's what I'm working on now. All right, so we are back after removal of the fender. That all went as expected. Keep in mind, I had this thing torn down about a year ago, so it makes it a lot easier. Some of those bolts can be really, really tricky to get out. I did want to correct myself. There's only one bolt on each side under the footrest, the rubber things. Those do tend to collect water, unfortunately. Over here, you can see this is what it looks like. Got one bolt here. I did some painting on that. It's last year, just to prevent the rust there and there. So that guy's off. Needs a little bit of cleaning, but by and large, it's not in too terrible a shape considering that the tractor's like 25 years old. So anyway, I did want to point out this is going to be the sensor that detects if you've got low fuel. Looks like I've just barely, I don't know if you can see that, but the fuel line is here, so I'm just barely below that. Might need to pump some gas out to prevent a bunch of spillage when I go pulling this guy up out of here to get it out. And then of course there is the dreaded and highly feared spool valve, which doesn't even look like a valve. It's got so much crud attached to it. Basically a lot of this is just soft squishy stuff, so my intention is to probably get in there with a vacuum cleaner first and get as much of it off as I can, and then probably hit it with some degreaser, brake cleaner, etc. to get that cleaned up. I actually had this taken apart, let's see, what was it? I guess maybe late summer, so all of that crud that you see there is just from when I ground up leaves. Of course, that does make for a fair amount of dust, but it was very clean at the time because I'd actually replaced the spool valve then, and obviously that didn't work to fix my leak. So anyway, the next step that I'm going to get, next stuff that I'm going to get started on is going to be removing the engine. So that's going to be, I believe the first few steps are get this hood off, which comes off relatively easily, you know, per the instructions in the manual. So I'm going to get cracking on that, and then I'll be back in a bit. All right, well, it's been about 30 minutes or so, and I've got pretty good progress as far as getting the starting to get the engine out. Basically, followed the instructions. I've got let's see, what have I got? I've got the hood off, which is a couple of different pieces per the instruction manual. I've got the muffler off, which is fairly straightforward again. Of course, battery is out. That could be a little bit painful to get out because the space is tight, and of course the battery's about 20 pounds or so. So if we come over and look at the manual that I'm following, engine replacement, I've followed steps 1 through blah 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 blah, and I had just completed step 13, which is remove the muffler assembly from the engine by kind of racking it back and forth once you get the 4 bolts that hold it at the bottom. So just looking ahead, next step, pretty easy stuff. Step 14, remove the choke and throttle cables, disconnect the evac, disconnect the wiring harness. That can be a little bit tricky because it just seems like plugs in general just don't like to come loose. So I'll probably get a pick set out for that. And let's see, then we're removing the fuel line, the hex bolts, securing the belt guard, and basically we're just working on kind of the front end of the engine where we start pulling the PTO stuff off. Actually, remove the battery from the unit. I've already done step 20. Woohoo! Yeah. So, and then we go to step 21. Blah 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 blah. So anyway, we're in terms of steps, I guess we're roughly halfway there. But I know for a fact that step 21, when we're trying to get these hex bolts out of the drive shaft, that is tricky, and it can be kind of drive you to cursing. Anyway, that's all for now. I'll get started on these next steps and report back in a bit. All right, so I wanted to pass along some notes. Okay. Step 14, remove the choke and throttle cables. That was extremely straightforward. Step 15, got some notes on that. That's also fairly straightforward. Wiring harness, that's kind of where I am now, so wanted to show you some stuff on that. So regarding the throttle and choke cables, I went ahead and took off. There is a shield, which is this guy, and what I did there was remove the 4 bolts that hold that in. There's 2 on either side. You can see one there, one at the top here, one at the top there, and one there. That one also holds the ground wire you see there in green. I went ahead and took that off. That allowed me to get a little bit easier access to this. I have marked the location of both cables, which holes they were. There's that one, and then there's that one, and then of course For these guys, generally what I like to do, rather than just pay ultimate attention to where they were, is I'll just, now that since I have the locations here, I will go ahead and put the cables in these guys, and then as I adjust the levers here back and forth, I kind of like to find the sweet spot of where the cables like to be, and then I just tighten those down. Okay, so that's that. Got the heat shield off. The heat shield is not actually mentioned anywhere in the instructions as far as I saw, but it is there and it does need to be taken off. Okay, the next step is the what they call the evap. It's basically just the vacuum that runs this guy. That's straightforward too. Just basically take a pair of pliers and grab this guy. I just shifted it back on the hose to there, and then this was in there. I basically just took a screwdriver and worked it back until I got it out. Okay, as for wiring, okay, you basically got, as I mentioned before, this green wire. Then you got this plug, which was in here. Sorry, this plug, which was in here. You basically just grab a hold of it and just pull it out. It's very straightforward. And then the other remaining wire is these two wires that go to the starter. It's just a matter of removing this nut, and then you got those free. The difficult part, if there is one, is there is a ground wire, which is not really mentioned in the documentation, and it is over on this side, kind of underneath the on the bottom side of the engine. Is this guy. That is a 13 millimeter, and basically what you kind of do there is just grab your 13 millimeter wrench and just slowly work it out. Unfortunately, it is way too long of a bolt. It's like a ½ an inch long, so it kind of takes forever. You don't really get too much access to it, but once you get it sort of kind of loose, you can put a long socket on it and just kind of spin it that way. So that's where we are now. I believe the next steps will be working on disassembling the front PTO. So we'll be back once we get started on working on that. Okay, so a couple more things I wanted to share. Let's see. Step number 18 here. Remove both of the okay, that's very straightforward. Step 19, remove the evac clip. See figure 8. Figure 8, evac clips here. So what I wanted to show you is this is basically a part of the how it engages the PTO. This is the evac clip, and to remove it, basically what you want to do is grab a hold of it with both sides and pull it up, and then you're able to slide it out like so, and remove it from this arm up here. As you can see, I've got it removed and down there. Now, step 20 was remove the battery. Very straightforward. As I mentioned before, it's a little bit on the heavy side. Step 21 is to remove the hex bolts that connect the drive shaft to the engine. Now this one's a little bit tricky because they are extremely hard to get to. So if you look back here, this is where the battery would normally sit, which is why they say to remove the battery. In there you can see at least 2 of the bolts. So what I like to do, I've got my 7/16 here on an extension, and up here I've got a 5/8 wrench. So what I do to be able to turn the engine easily is I just put my 5/8 wrench, now you can see it, on the front of the PTO, and I'm able to spin it to get each of those bolts into position. So then what I do to get the extra length I just use a 1/4 inch nut driver. Basically, you start off with the ratchet there on the extension. You loosen each one up, then you add the 1/4 inch nut driver to that, and you're able to spin them out. One thing I might suggest too is to not take all 3 of them out before you go to loosen the 4th one. Leave that 3rd one in so that you can spin it and get the 4th one loose. That way you're not fighting with the drive shaft trying to turn at odd, strange angles on you. So I'm going to work on that and be back in a bit. Alright, well, I have proceeded all the way through the steps to the step where it says support the engine with an engine hoist, and then loosen the 6 bolts. Those are along the frame on the side, on either side. Down here, you can see one there. There's one up here, and then there's one there. 3 of those on each side. The problem that I'm learning, and I had hoped to avoid this, is that I cannot get this engine hoist, this big sucker, under it appropriately from the front and still have basically be lifting at near center of mass. I've got the one hook here and the other hook down here. So that's going to put center of mass somewhere around here, and there's no way that with these long feet that I can get that under it without removing the deck, which I had hoped to avoid. Now, it's not the most difficult deck in the world to take on or take off and put on, but it is something I was hoping to avoid because it is kind of painful, and seems like every time I do it I end up greasy as heck because there's so many grease fittings on it. But anyway, yeah, so that's going to be the next step. Basically, it's fairly straightforward. You just pop the shaft for the universal joint. Well, you can see the back of the universal joint as it goes into the gearbox here, but you want to go into the front, which is down here. Basically, you pull back on this guy and that releases it, and then you release these 2 guys on either side. You just pull on this, and then you lift up these deck lift arms and slide it forward to release it from this guy, and then you can just push it out one side or the other. So yeah, fairly easy to get out. Getting it back in and getting it all lined up, not as easy. So that's the next step. Alright, well, as you can see, the deck is removed. It actually wasn't that bad. One thing I'd like to point out, though, a tip for removing this. As you can see, of course, I've got my deck set to where it mows about 3 inches, but this part of the deck is very high. So the easiest way to combat that is to just get on the back of your mower under the I guess you call that a hitch plate, with your floor jack, and jack that sucker up about 10 inches in the air. And once you do that, you can get the deck right out. Basically, all that I did was I used some bungee cords to support the lift arms, as you can see there. Same on this side. Got the little black guy there, and it's supporting that lift arm. So now I was able to get my engine hoist under it, and I've got that reasonably well secured. I've got to adjust it a little bit to get it pretty much straight up and down, but it's pretty close. I guess given the shipping weight of the old engine was 108 pounds, I'm guessing with oil and everything, that one's probably around about the same, maybe 110 pounds or so with 2 quarts of oil in it. I have not drained the oil. Didn't figure there's any point. So anyway, I do have that supported. Now I'm going to go about pulling the bolts out here. There's 3 on this side, 3 on that side, as I said previously. We'll go ahead and do that. And as per the instruction manual, what you want to do is lift it and then gently slide the entire engine forward to get it freed, to get the drive shaft free of that, more or less that grass guard there, and being real careful so that you don't screw up the coupler. So that's going to be the next step. So proof that no good deed goes unpunished. I was pulling the old, I don't know, I would keep wanting to call it a sending unit, but basically a fuel level indicator out. And I had just replaced this grommet because, well, there was a leak. And when I pulled that out, turns out I have ripped the grommet. So, anyway, ridiculous $2 piece of rubber ripped. Got that on order. $26. It's like $18.95, and then I wanted to expedite shipping, so this thing's not in my garage for a month. In the background, you'll probably hear, because the fuel tank was, well, it had a couple of gallons in it. I've set up a clickety-clack pump, and I am pumping all the fuel out of the tank, as much of it as I can get anyway. So basically I just happen to have that pump in stock, and I've got it hooked up to the tractor battery. So it's almost done. But yeah, you can see there's some trash down in there, so it probably wouldn't hurt to go ahead and pump all that out. Anyway, so we'll get that done. Basically, I didn't want all the gas fumes in my garage, so I figured I'd go ahead and empty it out into this container, and yeah. All right, so back with another update. I have finally opened the box that the engine comes in. Show you guys that. Looks pretty nice. Try to show you around here. That's about all I can see for now. It does have lift points on either side, and then one on the front, much like the old engine. And looking at the throttle and choke linkage, slightly different, but it looks like, I guess this is, let's see, I'm not sure which is which, but I can figure that out once I get the air filter off. Anyway, so that all looks good. A bunch of caution signs, warning this, warning that. Can't really see too much. So what the plan is, I've already got the hoist ready to lift this engine out. So I'm going to lift it out and put it up on my rolling cart here, and then lift this guy out and maybe put it on the table, or just get it off and leave it on that cart so that I can compare side to side. I was thinking, though, it'd probably behoove me to go ahead and remove the front pulleys for the power takeoff. So I have done that, and also I am taking off. I know that I've got to reuse the exhaust here and there. So as far as doing that, it's pretty simple. Regular thread. That's a 5/8 bolt. The battery powered impact did fine with that. It's kind of an unusual thing. You've got the bolt in the nut, and then you've got, these are all separate, which is interesting. So basically you've got a half a pulley, and you can see that is keyed. I believe you can see that. So that's like 4 parts, and then there's a spacer on the bottom. So basically you just put all that back in that same order. No harm, no foul. So yeah, next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and pull off these exhaust pipes and set them aside, and just plug some paper towel in those holes to prevent whatever from getting in. So I'll get that done, and then yeah, I'll start lifting this guy up, and get those bolts out and pull it off, put it to the side. All right, so I have got the engine freed, all 6 bolts out, and as the manual mentions, the painful part is back here, and that is basically trying to lift the engine just a little bit to get it to move forward, and at the same time, because you've got to clear the mesh here. So yeah, that was a little bit difficult, but just keep with it. It helps to have a helper, but unfortunately I didn't have one. So yeah, and then another thing that makes it tricky is the front of this guy wants to run into these pulleys, so you kind of got to play with the tilt of the engine to get it out, but eventually it will come out. So anyway, that's where we are right now. I'm going to go ahead and lift this beast up and put it up here. So that's the next step. All right, well, engine is out, so that's good. That was fairly uneventful once I had gotten it freed from the drive shaft that goes here. So the next steps, as I'd mentioned before, I'm going to pull that engine out, but I think before I do that, I want to go ahead and clean up the engine mount plate here and get it taken off of this engine. Just kind of set it aside, and then that way I can more or less set this engine aside, and then probably use this table again to start putting everything back on there. I do want to go ahead and sooner rather than later get the engine out of the box there, just so I can compare, you know, the shaft here and make sure that the flywheel, you know, I was told all this is going to work, but make sure that the flywheel has a provision to mount this coupler. So we'll see about that. But anyway, I think I'm going to pretty much call it for the day. I ran out of light for my, I ran out of battery power for my headlamp, so I think that's a sign that I'm going to just punt and think about next steps, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. Okay, so I made a little progress since the last update. Here we go. I have got the old engine sitting on a dolly for transferring what few parts need to be transferred over from what I know now. Basically, I have removed the engine mount plate. It's simple 4 9/16 fine thread bolts, here, 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 and here. Need to clean that up yet. So yeah, I've got that on the dolly, and then I've got the box for the new CH740 sitting here under my hoist, getting ready to hook that up and lift it out, see what I've got. I'm going to get it lifted up and put up on this cart like the other one, and we'll see what we've got. All right, well, I have successfully unboxed the new Kohler engine. Fairly happy with it. A couple things that are different. It has a nice oil cooler on it, so I think that'll help as far as longevity goes. show you around this way. They have supplied a pigtail, which I haven't thoroughly read up in the manual. I don't know, it's a bit of a mess, but hopefully some wire ties, I can clean that up. I'm not overly impressed with that. So here on what would be, I guess in this case, the front of the engine, everything looks good. They include new exhaust gaskets, which is good. Those are over here in the miscellaneous warning tags thing. They also have included a pretty nice manual, which I have gone through it a couple of times quickly. They mainly spend a couple of pages about the on the PTO. This one does drive off the flywheel. I guess the one big thing is there is a shaft sleeve, so I guess the size of this shaft is not quite as big as, in fact, yeah, if you look at it, it's not quite as big as that shaft. I'll be doing some measuring just to make sure that that everything else is the same. Hopefully threads are the same and all that. So they include a sleeve for it, which is here, and also some bolts, although strangely enough they've got 3 of one length and then 2 of 2 different lengths. But here are my mounting bolts, and I think they're in plenty good shape to reuse. So there's that. Further in the manual, more about the clutch, proper installation of this and that, a little bit more on the wiring pigtail, which, like I said, I haven't dived into that yet. As an electrical engineer, I'm not too worried about the electrical side of this. Port liners, I'm not sure that that is applicable because I don't really know what they're talking about. So they go through kind of a final checklist before you screw everything up. And that is pretty much that. The one thing, a couple things, and this we discussed on the phone, I'm gonna have to remove this guy. There was already another cover on this, which I've got up here, and I've already removed it. It's and kind of redundant. It's another cover, but definitely don't need that one. This cover is going to have a hole in it, and that's where this drive shaft's going to go through. This guy pretty much seems to fit on here. It's a little bit of slop, but basically the idea is that you're just trying to keep dust and trash out of both the engine and the transmission underneath the tractor. So there's that. The one thing that I do see, or don't see, that currently might be a bit of a showstopper, the sales guy that I spoke with said that this engine had it, and I don't see it. There should be a vacuum line coming out here. I can show you on the old engine. Comes out here, and that's actually ported right off of the intake, and it runs to this guy, which is actually, I've got it loosened up now, but that is actually part of the PTO engagement. It's vacuum electric. They call it EVAC, I guess, so electric vacuum, and that's what engages the PTO. So that's pretty doggone important. I'll have to give them a call on Monday to work through that. In the meantime, I'm just kind of looking over everything, seeing if I discover any other issues. Everything looks really good though, really nice. They shipped it bolted to this piece of I don't know, 3/8 plywood. The one complaint that I do have, well, another complaint that I do have is if this handy dandy instruction manual was actually in the very bottom of the box underneath the plywood, I think it would have made a lot more sense for them to put this on the top of the box so that when you open the top of the box, this is the first thing that you see. Yeah, there's that minor complaint. Got all of this stuff that I have yet to look through. I'm guessing that this is just a standard Kohler engine manual stuff. Not sure what that is. Oh, serial number stuff. Emissions related warning. And then of course here's this is a nice touch. These are the exhaust gaskets that I'll need, and also new nuts to go on there. So yeah, that's where we are now. Like I said, I'm gonna confirm that everything works and looks good with this and mates up with my my pulleys here, and just go through everything else, probably look at the electrical also, and just make sure everything there makes sense, and get my ducks in a row for a call to them on Monday, and we'll get whatever we need to get done here resolved. Hopefully underneath there on the intake is it does have the port, and it's just a matter of drilling a hole through the shroud and putting a piece of vacuum hose on it. Hoping that it's as simple as that. Well, I have managed to get the pulley or sections of metal which form the double pulley installed, and I wanted to correct some things that I said earlier. And anyway, so basically these bolts that shipped with the engine from Repower, these are not, as far as I can tell, the intention is not to use these for mounting the engine, but instead it is to use them for mounting the PTO. In my old engine, I had this bolt which mounted these pulleys, so that represents the diameter of the threads for the crankshaft. And here, as I learned, this bolt is a much larger diameter, so what I did was selected the one in this pack which was the correct length and had the correct shoulder and whatnot, and I reused this quite large flat washer, and they had included a lock washer with it, so I used that bolt and centered this up pretty much manually by hand, tightened it up, and then hit it with a small impact wrench, cordless impact wrench. Okay, the next thing I wanted to cover is wiring. Here I'm looking at the new engine. This is the pigtail that was installed by Repower Specialists. We can see, if we look at this closely, we've got a couple of extra wires here. This one is white, this one is yellow. There's another yellow one at the back. There's also a black wire here. These are all addressed in the wiring pigtail section of the manual. You can see that it lists a couple of extra wires there, so that doesn't really give me any heartburn. I did go ahead and use a couple of zip ties to neaten this up just a little bit in preparation for getting this connected up to the tractor harness. Basically just used the nippers and these 6-inch zip ties, so that's fairly straightforward. All right, some additional progress. I've got the engines sitting side by side here, so I could start swapping some stuff back and forth. Obviously, this is the old engine. I have removed the coupling from the flywheel in preparation for installing it on the new engine, and it is here. It attaches with these two bolts. It's fairly straightforward. I went ahead and test fitted it. It basically just goes in here like this, and those two bolts go in it. I did have to remove this plastic. It's a plastic grass shield. It just attaches with these 4 bolts. So remove that, and want to show you over here on the bench is that guy, and obviously there needs to be a hole in it. So if you look closely at this webbing, you can see that the webbing gets more substantial out towards the edge, and basically what you want to do, match this up with the one on the old tractor, is snip these guys as it transitions from the single outer or webbing going out. So I've already done that, and voila. For that, I just used, as suggested by the Repower guys, I just used these wire nippers. It worked perfectly. So I've got that ready to go, and it will just go back on here. It does bolt to the fan of the flywheel, so this actually spins, and just so you're aware, it spins, and it spins inside of this. I don't know what you would refer to that as. It looks like a really large piece of, I don't know, I guess the best way to describe it would be flex loom, but it's not split loom. So yeah, that's that. In terms of other progress, I have removed from the old engine, I have removed the oil drain, which is this guy, and this is the old elbow. So what I ended up doing on the old engine, this pipe is 3/4 inch MPT. I just went to Home Depot and got myself a 3/8 cap, and I didn't really want to mess with trying to get this this pipe out, so I've got a replacement one, which is this guy and this elbow. So there's that. I've yet to assemble that. One of the things that I learned about this engine is that it actually has oil in it, and there is the drain plug. I had removed that drain plug and quickly learned that it had oil in it. So what I'll be doing is getting this engine up at an angle so that I can get this brass guy here installed in it, and I'll be doing that. I'll catch you up on that in a little bit, but basically that's what I'm doing for that. I've got the old engine over there capped off and drained, and I've got everything kind of set out and ready for doing the new engine, for installing that on the new engine. Also, I spent a bit of time with Simple Green and a vacuum cleaner, and you see I've got some pig mat down there, just kind of cleaning up the frame, getting all the dust and combination of oil slash grease or oil, grease, and grass and leaf clippings. So just make that where when I do go to put the engine back in, I've not be working in a mess. And then also an update on this spool valve. I did kind of the same back here. Let's see if I can get the light where you can see it. I got that pretty well clean. I used a bunch of brake cleaner. So there's that. So I'm in pretty good shape as far as putting things back together. I just need to need to start doing it. Another thing that I have got to do is on the old engine. There are these on either side. These mounts with the bolts in it. I've got one over here as well. I need to take the two bolts that hold each one out and transfer these excuse me, from the old engine to the new engine. Those are what supports this heat shield for the exhaust pipe. Okay, so another thing that I have done, specific to the Cub Cadet that I am working on, there is the evac, which is, I've kind of got it boogered up here. It comes up here. See if I can get that. It comes up here and mounts like so. And there is a vacuum line that runs to the engine. And that's how that is actuated. It's a combination of electric and vacuum. And the new engine, as you can see, the old engine has a port on the intake. I have popped that shroud off, and I've already got it back on, unfortunately. But basically, this tube goes in here and goes to a fitting on the intake. So this was actually a bit of a bone of contention with Repower, because I didn't see any references to it in the manual. So I gave them I shot them an email, and they gave me a call back. So we went through it, and basically what they do is a provision for that. I've got this shroud just kind of stuck up here. I've already removed it. To remove it, there are, well, what I did to be organized was I removed all of the mounting hardware, and then on a piece of paper I have kind of labeled everything, just so I make sure that I don't get the bolts wrong. On either side, in these two locations, there are engine lift points. So there's 2 bolts here with a bracket, and there's also 2 bolts here with a bracket, and there's also this fuel pump. It's interesting, just as an aside, this fuel pump is driven by crankcase pressure. So that's the reason for this line running down to here. So it comes up, and I guess this would be considered the feed to the fuel pump. This is obviously, this is the input with the filter on it, and this is where your gas line will go, and then this is the feed that runs off to the carburetor. So anyway, back to what I was saying. The second bracket runs here and here. There is another bolt here and a bolt down here. Fairly straightforward. Couple of bolts holding the fuel pump in. I'm sorry, the oil cooler in. Same on this side. Bolt here and a bolt down here. So anyway, once you remove those, you can just reach up and pull the shroud off. I'll set that down. And what you're left with then is, this is the intake manifold, and from Repower, they just had a more or less a little hex head, I don't know, plug, I guess, here. This is the brass that's 1/8 inch MPT to 1/4 inch barbed fuel line fitting. I have removed it from the old engine and installed it on this one. And when I put the hose in place, one of the things that I noticed is that it would have come out the top of the shroud instead of the side of the shroud. You can see here it comes out the side and not the top. Now, most people could probably live with that, but I kind of like having it come out of have it come out the side. I thought maybe for rain it would make it a little bit more susceptible to water entering from up here. So what I've done is I got on the Amazon website, and I found a version of this that is a 90 instead of a 45. So the plan is to have it just come straight out, and then, or maybe slightly at an angle, and then be able to drill through the shroud and do that, you know, in a little bit more, in my opinion, clean fashion. So that's the update, and that's how the vacuum works. Repower does actually replace this intake manifold as part of their, you know, that's part of the service that you're buying. They replace it with this model that has this port on it. If you just bought a similar engine, you would need to figure out how, I don't know how, you basically just have to buy this particular intake and swap it out, or I don't know, I suppose maybe it's possible that you could swap the intake from your old engine, but I just don't think, given how this looks, that it would be compatible. So one of the reasons to deal with a company like Repower, they handle this stuff for you and make it a lot more simple. Okay, so I have successfully transferred the coupler that needs to go on the flywheel. Got that installed on here and got these snugged up nicely. Broke out the 3/8 ratchet to 1/4 inch because I was using my 1/4 inch metric sockets there. And also I have removed from the old engine the little ears that came out to support the shroud or heat shield that covers the it's made for mounting that guy. So I've got those transferred to the got those transferred to the new engine here and here. So all that went fine. I believe the next step is going to be to install the oil drain on the new engine. This guy will be coming in later today. And I believe as for the old engine, I believe I am ready to set that aside. Maybe just hang on to it for reference, wiring perhaps. But yeah, I think I've got that guy. Got everything removed that I need removed. Oil is drained. It could stand a cleaning. Okay, I am going to get started on replacing this spool valve which leaks. Hopefully you can see in this shot that it tends to weep out of the top, where the spool comes out of the top. And I also wanted to point out that there's an arrow on the top of that spool here. In this case, the arrow is pointing forwards. That is actually wrong. It should be pointing towards the back from everything that I've read. Now, what does that do? That basically just controls when you raise and lower. Let me back out here. There's a lever that goes over here on the side. So when you pull back on it, that determines if the deck goes up or down. So vice versa, if you push down like this, that determines what your direction of flow is. And that is out of these two lines on the side. So if you screw up and do like I did and have that arrow pointing forward, you need to reverse these two lines here. I currently have, let's see, what is that? That is the line at the, that is the bottom of the cylinder at the top, and the top of the cylinder, as you can see there, there's the arm coming out. At the top of the cylinder is at the bottom. So those need to be reversed when I put this back in correctly. Yeah, that's an easy mistake to make. And I believe the easiest way to fix that, other than reversing the lines, is to just take off this bracket, which will release this arm. and then you'll be able to just rotate this spool around 180 degrees. Of course, you'll still be releasing this top line here, but that shouldn't be any big deal. It should just pretty much stay in place when you do that. Now, this is the second, actually this is an eBay spool that I bought, and it was listed as, you know, in working condition, but it does tend to weep out of the top. That is the problem that I've had out of all of the spool valves that have been on this, and I say all because this is essentially the third, well, this is the second valve, but the one that came with it, I tried rebuilding. I'm going to include some links in the description of information that I've dug up on this that were really helpful. At least so far they've been helpful to a certain degree, because ultimately I still end up with the leak. But over here on the shop table, I have the original spool valve. This is seen from the vantage point that you see on the tractor. These are the two lines that I show going out to control the deck lift hydraulic cylinder. This is going to be your input, and this is going to be your return. As you can see here, I have that arrow pointing towards the back so that I won't make that mistake again. So this one has already been rebuilt, and I won't go into the details of rebuilding it, but it's really fairly straightforward. All you really need to do is remove this Phillips head bolt here, and that will allow the spool to just slide out of the valve. Now, I've seen people that say, oh, you need to remove this, I don't know if you can see it there, but see if you can remove that snap ring, and then there's a spring under there, and I found that you can disassemble it just fine without doing that. Really, all you need to do is remove this guy. As for the rebuild kit on eBay, you can get for about, I think, $15. A gentleman's kind enough to put this package together that has, these are the O-rings for the lines that go in here, 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 and here. They're all the same. And then for those, there are also backing rings. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but for each line that goes in here, you've got an O-ring and a backing ring. So, but for the spool valve itself, what I'm trying this time that I haven't tried before, this was also recommended on there, is these particular rings. They are the Buna, B-U-N-A, Buna 70. And these are really, really cheap from oringsandmore.com. In fact, it costs you more for shipping than what it does for the rings. But yeah, so I basically just took this sucker apart, pulled the spool out, and replaced these two rings. Hopefully this refurbished spool will work better than the ones in the past have. Okay, I'm into this spool valve, into the removal part. I basically started by, and it's not necessary to do this, I started by removing bolts from here and from here. Sorry if you can't see that. And those allow me to take the bracket that supports the lift arm. You basically, you can't really remove that at this point. Next thing I did was remove the bolt from here that holds the clamp for this line, and then I removed the bolt from here that holds the bracket for these two lines. I've cleaned up those lines and removed the O-rings and the backup rings. I've got those up here. I'm just going to replace them, which is best practice, even though they were just a few months old. There's the two brackets. This one is the one for the back, and this one is the one for the middle. Then next step is going to be a little bit of cleanup, and then what I will do to actually I'll remove one more line of that bolt there, and that will free up the valve. And then we've got a couple more nuts there that run all the way. There's bolts that run all the way through the valve. We'll get that out, and we'll have the valve completely out at that point. Okay, so I have got the old spool valve removed, and got the lines fairly well cleaned up, and got the clamps here. Still need to clean those up along with the lever. And then over here on the bench is the old spool, and you can see it is quite nasty. I'm going to work on getting those bolts out of and getting those brackets, either side bracket, transferred over to the newly rebuilt one, and get all that cleaned up, and then I'm going to start putting it back in. Okay, so I have cleaned everything up, and I've got the right and left side brackets transferred over to the replacement spool. Okay, ready for some assembly here. Of course, you're going to want to make sure that you've got all of your clamps and your bolts cleaned up, and your nuts and your valve. You want to make sure that you go with a paper towel and hit all of your ports and make sure that all of those are clean. One more port over here, of course. Get those cleaned up, and then this hard line, this is the one that you're going to want to start on because it obviously doesn't move. So the first thing I'm going to do before putting this into position is I'm going to grab a backup ring, which is one of these guys, and I'm going to put that on the line first. It has the backup rings have a flat side, and then they have a concave side. So the flat side is going to go towards the I guess the shoulder that you see there on that hard line, and then that'll leave the concave side towards the O-ring, and then slip the O-ring on after that, and then just push it right onto the spool valve into that port, and then basically at that point install these bolts and these nuts that will hold the spool valve in place. So that's what I'm going to knock out next. Okay, so I've got the spool valve sort of in place. I wanted to point out something that I was wrong about. In order to get that thing in, you can't put it in with this support bracket for the lever that moves the spool up and down. Also notice that my arrow is pointing to the rear, which is the way you want it. Basically, you just have to get the spool onto the hard line, and then then drop this guy, this lift lever, onto the spool. And then I found that if you get this first, you can almost see it here, get this first bolt started there, that will keep constant pressure against the valve. And then from this side, this lower one really doesn't help much because it's slotted, and that means this bolt can just push out. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and get those bolts tightened, and then I'll start connecting the other lines to it. Okay, so I have got the valve mounted. Those two bolts are tight. I have also installed the locking, or the hold down bracket for the hard line, and I have installed the return, which is on the rear. And basically it has been known, if I can get this camera in the right place, to interfere with the lines that go to the cylinder. So what I've done here, and I don't know if it's right or not, but I'll find out shortly, is I have pushed that thing all the way against the spool's valve block to try to create as much room here in this gap for these lines to fit down in. Now, as I said previously, this line goes to the bottom of the cylinder, so it's going to go to the bottom of the valve. This line goes to the top of the cylinder, so it's going to go to the top of the valve. I've got to track down some more backing rings and O-rings for these guys, and that is tricky because of the way that this hold down works. Basically, you have to install them both at the same time. So basically, you have to have those two lines, upper and lower, pinched into this, and then push them into the spool at the same time. Hold this with one finger, and then get your bolt started. So that is arguably the most difficult part of this whole thing. Just patience, and hopefully you won't drop that bolt too many times. So I'm going to get started on that next. Okay, well, I was able to get the the two additional hydraulic lines in, as you can sort of see here. Yeah, there you can see them. These two guys, oops, this guy and this guy. So basically what I did was, again, the bottom line from the cylinder, which is this guy, goes to the, if I can get you a better look at that, goes to the bottom of the cylinder, with the top being where the actual rod comes out of the cylinder. The top is this line, and it runs to the top. So basically I started with the bottom. I put my backup ring and O-ring on, and installed the just basically inserted that into the valve block, and then I used the clamp and just held it there, and then took the top line and just basically put it in there, and then held that with one hand, got the bolt started, and it was a lot easier than what I'd remembered. So so we're almost done with that. The only thing I've got left to do is these two bolt holes here are where my support for the lever goes. So I'll get those two bolts and that bracket in there, and I will be done. A little bit of cleanup. So this wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. Turns out when you don't screw up and have to put the lines backwards, in other words, there again, that arrow is pointing back, it's a heck of a lot easier. So it's still not easy, but it's very doable. Okay, so all done. I've got the additional bracket holding the lever arm on. Everything's tightened up, and we'll just hope that doesn't leak. Okay, well, I have received my fitting. This is the 45-degree fitting from Amazon, and I've got it basically threaded in. You can see it down under the shroud there. What I'm going to do, I've put a piece of tape here. So what I'm going to do, I just basically wanted to put it in there and kind of figure out roughly where it looked like it was going to come out of the shroud, and it looks like it's going to come out roughly about right here. So I think I'll be good with that. So let me remove this shroud and show it to you. So if you look, it's quite long. I mean, wicked long compared to this guy. Let me put those up side by side. So yeah, that's it basically has an extra barb on the end. So I think, I don't know, I could leave it like it is, or I could easily take off this last barb. I'm going to give that some thought. But basically, yeah, so what I'm going to do is put some Teflon tape on it, and well, figure out what I'm going to do about it lengthwise, but put some Teflon tape in it and tighten it up down in there, and get it to point in roughly that direction. Drill a hole in the shroud, and then use my handy dandy hose, and boom, we'll be all set. Okay, so I have got the fitting on there used for the vacuum. Looks good. I've got the hose on, and I just wanted to show you guys this before I fit the shroud back on. I've also got the hole drilled in the shroud. Line that up, just barely made that corner edge. So, but I think it's going to work out just the way I wanted it to. So. Alright, last bit on the hose. I've got the shroud not actually installed, but it's fitted into place, and the screw holes pretty much line up, and you can see down inside there, everything turned out the way I wanted it to, and this guy will just kind of flex off to the side like this, and the evac line will hook up there. So the next steps are going to be to go ahead and put all the bolts back in this, get everything reattached, and yeah, and then I believe after that we'll be fitting the oil drain to it, and after that I think we're pretty much ready to start installing this back into the tractor. So more to come. All right, well, I've got the engine the shroud reinstalled on the engine, all the bolts in, everything checked 2 or 3 times. So looks like we're in pretty good shape. My next step will be to get the oil drain installed, which goes down here. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to get this engine to tilt back this way to get this up. So I'm going to noodle that one through and get cracking with that. All right, back at it. I have managed to get the engine elevated at the angle that I wanted. Basically what I did was I just added another chain link here, which allows me to spin this 90 degrees so that I can get the chains to the front and the rear. So what I'm going to do next is pull that plug out and clean that up, and then I'm going to install this guy and use some PTFE. Get that thing installed. I suspect I'll probably have to lift it a little bit more to crank this in. I've got a couple of wrenches sitting by for that. So let's get into that. Okay, well, I've got the oil drain all situated. It was very straightforward. Just basically tighten it up. The rule of thumb there is get it to what you think is tight enough, and then give it an extra turn. It seems to work for me, but you know, only time will tell. Another thing that I did too, just for grins, is I took my straight edge and I ran that underneath just to make sure that I've got clearance to my my drain. I wanted it slightly tilted down if possible, but of course not too much to where I'm hitting the engine mounting plate. So next step is going to be to get this contraption unrigged and get this engine spun back in the correct direction. And then I'm going to be putting on the exhaust pipes. The folks at Repower Specialists were kind enough to include, these are those pipes, were kind enough to include new gaskets and new nuts. So I'll be doing all that next. And then as far as I know now, it is ready to secure, once that's done, secure to the engine plate, which is here, and then start dropping it back in the tractor. So more to come. Okay, well, I have rejiggered the lift here, got everything to spin in the right direction, and I have installed the exhaust pipes to the heads loosely. I was going to tighten them up, and then I thought, you know, it's kind of a bear to get that muffler to slip over both of these at once, so I might as well just leave them a little bit loose, and then I'll make myself a note. Probably use a piece of tape to remind myself, hey, I need to tighten these guys up. And then I've got the engine lifted up, and I'm just looking at this engine plate. So I'm gonna slide it under there and put these 4 bolts in it. It's very self-explanatory. That'll be the next step. Well, I got the engine plate mounted to the engine, so that's good. And while I was doing that, it dawned on me that I needed to put anti-seize on these exhaust studs, so I went back and popped those off real quick and stuck some good old Permatex nickel anti-seize on them. And I think I probably will do the same thing with these exhaust pipes for putting them into the muffler. I haven't really made up my mind on that yet. It hasn't been a problem, too much of a problem getting that off, but I've only had it off twice now, and you know, this tractor's old, so anything you can do to potentially keep things from rusting and seizing up is probably a good thing. So okay, with a little help from an assistant, I managed to get the engine in place. All 6 of the bolts that mount the tray, engine tray, to the frame are in place, no nuts on them. And then what I'm sort of worried about next is this guy. Then of course I got the drive shaft to get in place and get tightened up. So those will be next steps, but you know, so far so good. We're getting there. Okay, well, I have successfully gotten all 6 of the engine plate bolts tightened down. I have enlisted the assistance of a helper who held the crank bolt there, which used to be 5/8, now 9/16 with this new engine, so that I could tighten down these 4, which you can barely see back there, 4 drive shaft bolts. So that is good news. I pretty much got this boot thing in place. I believe it'll be it'll be okay. And then we'll get started on the next steps. Next steps will involve basically reassembling, putting the belts back on, and getting the PTO all set. And then, best I recall, there's some wiring steps. I've got some figuring to do on how to make this neat. It's a little bit messy now as a result of changing the engine out, but we'll get there. Okay, well, I have been going through the instructions in reverse. as I mentioned in the previously, working on PTO. PTO belts installed, PTO idler arm installed, PTO assembly installed, extension spring installed. Of course, 21, I'd done that previously. That's the drive bolts. Step 20, remove the battery from the unit. I haven't put the battery back in. I have done step 19, the evac clip. And I was on step 18, the belt guard. And that is actually the first, I guess, casualty of this this conversion. The engine does not have the same accommodations. If belt guard would go here, and then I don't know if you can see it. I can get my camera right to show it to you. And if you look at that, the spacing between those threaded holes on the engine is just not the same. So at best, I could put a single bolt in the hole on the right, and then just hope for the best, or I could just leave it off altogether. So yeah, and those are different size bolts than what came out of the other engine. So gonna think on that for a little bit. I don't know, it's not a huge deal. I guess that's belt guard. It's made to keep the belts from, if one were to break, it's made to keep them from flying up and doing damage to the muffler, or etc., etc. Anyway, here's some look at the installed PTO idler arm assembly, spring installed, evac clip installed. And I also went ahead and reconnected the ground wire that's over here at the bottom. So making some progress on the wiring stuff. So yeah, I don't know what to do about this, but next steps, I was looking through those. That involves reconnecting the wiring, and then at some point I'll be putting the muffler back on. That's a must before I start it, just to make sure that there's no issues with the spacing here. Get my throttle and choke cables on and get those adjusted. But yeah, we're getting pretty close. So not so bad. We're getting there. Okay, so a second issue that I am going to have to resolve, and I think I've found a fix. The OEM fuel filter came up and ran to a point for the fuel pump that was on the valve cover. This is slightly different. It actually has another, well, this fuel pump is driven by back pressure in the engine, but obviously, you know, I could bend this, but that's one heck of an angle there. So what I think I've decided to do is to drill a hole in the lower part of the firewall. Instead of exiting high or entering the engine bay high, I'm going to, the fuel line runs down along the frame. What I'm going to do is drill a hole in this area and let that line run directly in there, and then run it up and to my filter, something like that. I'm going to just double check before I go to that trouble. Double check that the side panel that goes on here still has enough room to clear that. I'm reasonably certain that it does, because I'm pretty sure that this is the bolts for the side panel. So I'll double check that quick, and then drill that hole and run that, reroute that fuel line. So Okay, well, did what I said I was going to do. I just drilled a hole in the lower part of the firewall down here, ran the fuel line right in and up to the fuel filter. So yeah, I think that's all good now. So it fits. It's nice and firm. I don't think it's going to flop around too much. If it does, I don't know. It's not going to flop around any more than what the one that was on there for nearly 20 years did. So I don't think there'll be an issue. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so what I'm about to do is modify this belt guard or belt guide. I've already drilled out this hole to accommodate a 3/8 bolt, and what I'm going to be doing now is just nipping this corner off. That's going to allow me to use a washer. I think I'm going to have to cut it to go around this, a washer to allow it to bolt to the front of the engine. So here goes. I'm just going to put this on my bench grinder and grind this little corner off here. Okay, well, you can see I have successfully ground the corner off, and I've dug up a couple of washers here. I've got a really thick washer on the bottom and a fender washer on the top, and what I'm thinking I'm going to do is cut a slit in this. So I'm going to clamp them in my bench vise, and then just use a cutoff wheel and cut a slit, with the idea being that once I do that, I can get that to just fit around this. I'm going to go up and put this on the tractor and use a Sharpie and mark about where I think I need that slit, and see what I can come up with. Okay, so as promised, got an update on this belt guard. So what I've done is track down a couple of flat washers. This is a fender washer, and this is a bigger, beefier, thicker washer. And you see that guy's pretty thin, and this guy is not so thin. And what I'm going to do is basically put them down there like that, and that should, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but short of doing welding on this bracket, I think that's the best solution. What I'm shooting for here is if necessary, this thing could be taken off this. I'm not modifying the bracket too terribly bad. It could actually be put back in service on the original engine. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I go to this much trouble? Well, number one, the engine has that, or the tractor had that on it from the factory. So I assume that the engineers thought it was going to be a problem. And if you think about it, when one of these belts breaks, basically they are spinning, this should be spinning in a clockwise direction. And as you can see, the pulley at the bottom is bigger than the one at the top. So if the belt were to break here, say, it's going to want to, well, first of all, the deck and those blades are quite a load on this engine. So, you know, let's say if one were to break in the worst possible scenario here, it would come flying up and potentially slap anything that's up here with a great deal of force, because the pulley down below is still going to be pulling that belt. So it could come up here and, for example, take out my exhaust, take out anything that's up here. Parts on this tractor, being 25 years old, are very hard to find. So if I can spend a few minutes here, there, everywhere to safeguard, then that's what I'm going to do. It's just the way that I think and the way that I operate. So I'm going to get that installed, and I'll bring you back once it's set up and on there. Okay, so I now have the belt guard installed, and as you can see, there is a little bit of gap between the belt and the guard on either side, so I'm happy with that. And you can see my washer's in place there. It's a nice stout mount, looks fine. It's going to be hidden by everything, but you know, I'm going to know that it's there. So that is done. The other thing that is done is the connection of the choke and throttle linkages. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details of how I hook that up, but I will go through the philosophy of kind of what I did and how I did it. So if you look at this mechanism, the bottom is going to be your throttle, and I say that because it's the one that is connected to, if you look back in there, it is the one that is connected to the governor arm. So okay, so bottom one, and when I say that, this linkage gets kind of complicated, but basically what you're doing when you pull the throttle is you are pushing this, which means you are actually pushing this guy. So this set of 3 holes, and there's actually another 3 holes on the other side, which are tough to see right here. So you got a whole boatload of choices. Same for the choke. So what I did was I started with the cables loose, just dangling here, and I came over here and I started actuating each of these and seeing what action the cables had, and more or less getting a feel for, as I move this throughout its range, to see how much each cable moved. And basically the answer was it's approximately 1 inch. So what I did from there was just kind of experiment and find locations on these arms that made sense. So in general, for these arms, they don't need to really travel 1 inch. In fact, 1 inch is too much travel for them. So what I did was I opted to use the furthest away from the pivot point. So they'd be the far outside ones. And then once I had established that, I soon realized that the throttle needed to be inside and the choke needed to be outside. So then what I did was I just hooked the cable into the outermost slot, and again actuated, like this one is the actuate the throttle, and basically watch kind of what happens. You can see there sort of what's happening. And a couple things you want to look for is when you're at minimum throttle, for example, you're going to be all the way down here. So see, this is my minimum. So you can see I'm basically not even, like if I hold this back and then I go to actuate the throttle from up here, I'll go ahead and move it until it touches the throttle, which is about there. You can see that I basically have that much position on my throttle control from the operator side that is, anything below that is pretty much dead. So in other words, I don't even really do anything at the linkage up here to act on the carburetor until I get to about right there. So my first part of that is dead. I'm fine with that. That's kind of balancing out because you got that dead spot there, but then once you get to here, okay, so that's the part where it's no longer dead, and then you start pulling on it. At some point you start pulling really, really hard on this spring, on the throttle spring, or the governor spring. And the harder you pull on that, the higher your RPM will be, because you're providing more resistance against what the governor wants to do. So that's it kind of for throttle. And then for choke, now choke's a little bit different because it doesn't have a nice, it doesn't have a decoupled. It's like fully coupled. In other words, this is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I had, is that absolutely the choke was very, very open. In other words, I didn't want to leave, and you should never want to leave your choke open in any, or closed, even slightly closed in any position. So I made sure, actually, when I installed this cable here, that I'm actually pushing on this a little bit. So this cable's in a little bit of a bind to push that, to make sure that it's very open when my choke is off over here. Now that, of course, has a downside too, and that means that when I am fully choked, as I am, like say here, over here on the operator's panel, I'm not fully choked. Now that just has to do with the fact that, you know, these controls here are moving this cable back and forth approximately 1 inch, like I said, and that's just too much for these arms. I don't know, possible fixes would be you could weld on, you know, you could weld on an extension to this guy. And then I also read that there are some, I'm going to show you up under the dash. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me turn my light on. That there are a couple of different positions that those cables can be put in. But I started looking at that control under there. I can get you a better shot of it. I started looking at that control under there, and removing that is like apparently a heck of a bunch of work. So I just said, you know, let me try it like this, and if it makes me really unhappy, I'll tackle that at a later date. So anyway, I've got my choke and I got my throttle, at least a good initial setting. So we'll try that out, and if for some reason I run into problems or I'm not happy with it, it's fairly easy to get to adjust. Next thing, before going through everything that's left to be connected, I am definitely left with a ground, and that ground is supposed to go here, which is also supposed to be a tie-in from the exhaust shield, which is this guy. Goes like this. So it's supposed to have a provision for a bolt in the on the engine at about this location. So in looking at this, it does have that, but there's a big problem, and that is that there is literally no room. You can see it better from that angle. There's literally no room for a bolt of any length. It's going to go right in, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and then it's going to start hitting the cylinder head. So that's no good. So what I'm going to have to do is bring that out to maybe about here, So that'll, you see, in behind there, I actually have a little bit of space in this area here to have a bolt that maybe goes in, I don't know, 3/8 or 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to have to do is drill a hole here, and I'm going to have to drill a corresponding hole somewhere through here. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is use a nutsert, and or a riv nut. Basically, that's just a rivet that is essentially threaded, and you just drill your hole like you normally would, and then you use this special tool which just pulls on this, crimps it up like a rivet, and makes for a more or less like a nut that is attached to the backside. So that's going to be my next my next chore that's going to be painfully time consuming, but do it once, do it right. I know, theoretically I could just use a sheet metal screw and go through it, but as soon as I did that, then down the road somewhere I'm going to install it for the third time, and the threads are going to strip out, and then I won't have a good ground. So yada yada. Just do it once, do it right. So I'm going to get to work on that next. Okay, I've got my riv nut installed, as you can see. That worked out fine. As I said I was going to do, I basically just installed this heat shield, and then I carefully measured and marked where I wanted my my hole to be based upon the available space on this piece of sheet metal, and I transferred that to this, as you can see with the pencil marks, and then punched it, drilled a pilot hole, and then installed this shield, drilled the pilot hole here, and then I drilled this guy out to appropriate size for the bolt, and then drilled the hole for the riv nut, which, as it turns out, is I believe this is a 6mm. Yeah, 6mm. And then I just took the riv nut and used the riv nut gun. There's all kinds of articles, or rather YouTube videos on doing that. That's nothing special. So yeah, I've got that, and that gives me my place for the ground wire in the original location. So that's good, and it also gives me the missing place to mount that heat shield. So in terms of next steps, I believe I'm going to connect the starter wire here, install the battery, and hopefully things won't catch on fire or don't let any the magic smoke out. And then I will install the muffler. I did test fit the muffler just as a sanity check to make sure that my spacing here was correct, and that all worked out just fine. Install the muffler, and then go ahead. Those are still loose, so I'll go ahead and tighten those up once I get the muffler installed. At that point, I believe I am ready to fire it up, minus this grommet that I ordered. Ended up being $26 shipped, FedEx 2-day. I believe that it's out for delivery today, so I should be able to actually add gas without it filling up the garage here with the gas fumes, and get this thing fired up. I do also need to add oil before I do that, so that's a good reminder. Okay, getting closer. I have the muffler installed, and basically just installs with 2 bolts on either side. I've replaced these with stainless steel. I did go ahead and put some anti-seize on the pipes leading into the muffler on either side. So that's done. I've got the primary wire to the starter wired up, in good shape there. I've got the battery more or less installed. Did leave off the negative terminal, so that's good. And let's see what's next. Still got a bit of a wiring nightmare down here. I'm thinking I'm just going to leave it like it is in case I need to troubleshoot something, and then once everything proves to be okay, then I'll try to clean that up with some wire ties and whatnot. So I've got that. I also have the big heat shield to put on here. It fits differently on this engine. I'm not quite sure exactly how. It's running into this cable, so I'm going to have to make some sort of an accommodation for that. So that's going to be the next step. And after that, I believe we are ready to add some engine oil and get it cranked up once I get that grommet. Okay, I finally got my new grommet to replace the one that I tore up while removing it the other day, and that's going on my I guess fuel sending unit, or fuel is damn low gauge. I'm going to use some silicone dielectric compound, which I hear is compatible with rubber, and basically I'm going to install this in the tank, and then put a little silicone dielectric grease around it, and slip this this sensor in. I've got the sensor installed. That was very straightforward. I just used the grease and put the grommet into the tank, greased the inside of the grommet, then greased the fuel sensor. It popped right in. I connected the wire, so we're good to go there. Secondly, I have installed the heat shield up here, so that's all done. I did have to make a bit of a modification, here to allow the choke cable to come through. This was already broken, so it is what it is, but yeah, heat shield's in place. I have got the ground wire attached. I have got the fuel primed, so I am ready for startup, and I have got the deck moved into position, so I am ready to jack this thing up. I've got my jack over there ready to jack it up and push it back under. I am going to, before I install the deck, I've got my grease gun over here, so I'm going to hit those grease fittings on it before I install it, especially on the on the spindles, where the you know, that's the vast majority of everything that spins. So I'm gonna get on that, and I'll be showing you the first fire up momentarily. Okay, so I've got my greasing done. I hit each of the spindles, one here, and one over here. And I also hit this drive shaft. There's a universal fitting in the universal joint here, and another one up here, and finally one for the shaft here. Went ahead and hit those three. There are also grease fittings for each wheel, and then for this guy, but I hit those about 5 hours ago, so I'm pretty sure those are good. So next thing we got to do is slide this under the tractor after jacking up the back end. Okay, here is the moment that we've all been waiting for. I have got the deck reinstalled. That was really no big deal. Again, trick there is to just jack it up from the back, slide the deck under it, get it positioned, lower it back down, and then it's pretty easy, especially on a concrete surface. So yeah, I've checked everything over. We're ready for first start. Again, I've got the fuel line primed, so it should just start right up. So what I'm going to do is give it some choke like that, and then up a little bit as far as throttle, say about like that. And then I've got to push down on the brake lever and turn the key and hope for the best. So here we go. Key turned, no smoke, so that's good. Alright, good deal. Woohoo! Seems to run good. Don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to try to yell. Everything looks good. Gonna actuate the deck up and down. See if my I've got low fuel. I've only got about a gallon in it. Can't really see it here. I guess that's okay. All right, I'd say that's a success. Woohoo! All right. Well, now I can continue on. Spool valve looks to be just fine. I don't see any leaks. So now I'm going to continue on with reassembly, which is putting the hood back on, doing the lights, basically just everything that's in the manual. Then we'll get the fender on, which is just sitting over here. Seat on, etc., etc. So yeah, we're definitely almost done now. So that's great. Great. Okay, well, with that, it is all done. It was just that easy. I'd like to give a special thanks to the guys at Repower Specialists.com. They were great. Dave and Dallas. Dave was my original sales guy, and Dallas was tech support. I was in touch with him when I ran into some issues with that evac vacuum nipple. But yeah, I highly recommend these guys. You know, you get what you pay for, and that's definitely the case here. So yeah, if you're interested in replacing the engine in an older tractor or older piece of lawn equipment that needs like a Kohler, or I'm not sure what other brands these guys sell, but highly recommended. Thanks, Repower Specialists. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.